Big news out of Royal World, which is King Charles will be formally having his coronation next year. It will happen in May. But the date, well, a little controversial. And obviously, Prince Harry's not in the family WhatsApp chat because they decided to put it on little Archie's birthday. Let's talk about this now with Michael Cole, the former BBC Royal Correspondent. Michael, is the family chat not working? Did the King not simply ask his kids, hey, can you guys do May the 7th?
It's interesting. They could have gone the whole hog. They could have chosen June the 3rd, which would be 70 years and one day after the Queen's coronation in 1963, when I hasten to add, Paul, I was 10 years old and I remember it terribly clearly. I remember the ultra-smart Australians in the great pageant and parade with their bush hats, looking absolutely spanking brilliant, and also the Canadian Mounted Police and the New Zealanders. All of that very much appealed to me as a 10-year-old child, because that coronation in this country ushered in the television age. People, for the first time, bought a television. My parents did, for £100, an HMV black and white set with a 12-inch screen. And somehow we managed to get 17 people from the little street we lived in into our back room, watching it for hours on end. Of course, this time it's going to be different, but Paul, there's going to be plenty of pageantry, pomp and circumstance, and I'm quite sure Australia will be playing a prominent part in it, as is only right and proper.
As a 10-year-old boy, if I'd told you the next time there's a coronation, everyone will be watching this on their phone, you would have thought I was insane.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you one thing, Paul, there have been more solar eclipses in the last 200 years than there have been coronations. There have only been 7 coronations. So this is a very rare and spectacular event. And although King Charles wants to slim it down and simplify it to some extent and make it more inclusive, if you will, there'll be ceremony which nobody has ever seen. Most people alive have never seen before. Only old people like me remember it from watching it on TV.
You're 21, mate.
And those who happened to be there at the time. And of course, in those days, that coronation in 53, that was really the last hurrah of the British Empire. At the time, the Queen was the Queen of, I think, 34 different realms, including Australia, Canada, Britain, of course, and other places around the world. The new king has 14 realms. So it's a different world, and we will look at it very differently. But what was interesting, and you were in London at the time, and you will remember how many young people were fascinated by this. We were in Green Park by Canada Gate looking at the facade of Buckingham Palace, and there were thousands of young people there with their families, but also there of their own accord, teenagers and so on. So, you know, the world likes a big parade, and there'll be none greater than the one we'll be having next May the 6th.
Well, also, the thing that was obvious when we were together in London is that there were still spontaneous applauses for King Charles in the earliest days of his reign. So when it's not tinged with sadness, it's going to be this incredible celebration. But when he talks about slimmed down, now I've heard that this means everything from the number of people who get to attend and potentially the length of the ceremony itself. What does slimmed down mean in real terms when you've got palaces in every different country and multiple in the capital in London?
Yeah, well, last time they managed, and I don't know how they did it, they managed to get 8,000 people into Westminster Abbey. Well, this time it's going to be 2,000, and that's not just because of security or health and safety reasons. They managed to get the entirety of the British aristocracy in their noble robes and in their own coronets, wearing their own coronets. Well, that will be very different. It'll be a dress-down affair. I think it's going to be sort of morning dress or even lounge suits, and also people's own tribal dresses, because it will be very much more inclusive of the multicultural society we have in this country and indeed in the Commonwealth around the world. So that will be different. And instead of a ceremonial, a ritual that took 3 hours, it will be slimmed down to about an hour, which was about the same for the funeral of Her Majesty the Queen. quite recently. But I think King Charles is a great one for doing things properly. I think every bit of the ritual, every comma, every jot and tittle of the ceremonial, the ritual of coronation will be obviously adhered to, including the anointing of his chest with holy oil. Well, at that moment, the BBC cameras who were allowed into the Abbey in 1953, they chastely looked away at that moment, that very holy moment when holy oil is applied to the body of the new monarch. So it will be simpler, but there will still be a very great pageant, a very great parade, and I'm quite sure the constituent parts of the Commonwealth, which was called the British Commonwealth in those days, but now the Commonwealth, will be there represented and be very proud to do. I remember at the time, living in London as I did in the suburbs, we came into London, we saw all the decorations, everybody decorated their house. And of course, the visiting contingents from the various countries were there. We saw the Australians walking around in their uniforms. We were glad to see them. There was a great feeling of family, a great feeling of celebration, and a great feeling that we were part of history. And I think that's what many people relish at a time like this. You and I, we both live in a constitutional monarchy. It's a system which seems to work very well for us. A lot of less happy countries are very envious for the way we do administer our doings. Of course, we have arguments and we have rows and we kick each other in the shins every now and then. But by and large, we run our affairs in the way we would wish to have them. And I always feel that the fact that there is a monarch is a guarantee against extremism, against dictatorship, because at the very end of the day, the monarch has to sign off the laws. And it's quite conceivable that a law that came up, which was quite clearly against the best interests of the public, the monarch would refuse to sign it.
Now, Michael, a bit of an elephant in the room, or dare I say, sort of the final Band-Aid that needs to be ripped off here, which is that very obviously and traditionally, a queen, well, her husband doesn't get called the king, but a king, his wife gets called the queen. Now, I know that we keep saying Camilla is the queen consort, queen consort, queen consort, but she's going to also have a crown placed upon her head. In all truth, in all honesty, right. She'll be the queen, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. You're on the money completely. I would expect nothing less, because the big difference between this and 1953, when the Queen was crowned, the Duke of Edinburgh, who had married the Queen 5 years earlier, or 1947, 6 years earlier, almost 5.5 years earlier, he was not crowned. He approached, he bent his knee, and he pledged his loyalty to Her Majesty the Queen. But he wasn't crowned. Now, when a king is crowned, his spouse, his queen, is also crowned. That happened in 1937 when King George VI, the king from the King's Speech, he was crowned after his brother David, Edward VIII, had abdicated. And sitting next to him on an adjacent throne was the Queen, Queen Elizabeth, who we better know as the Queen Mother. And she had her own crown, and she indeed was also anointed and had her own gown. And so this is what will happen this time. Camilla Parker Bowles, as she was, because they were both divorcees when they married in 2005, she will be sitting next to him and she will be crowned. That is the way it's done. And she will become, as you say, the Queen, Queen Camilla, Queen Consort, and he will be King Charles III, which he is, of course, already. That's the way it works out in this country, and that's the ritual that will be observed on May the 6th next year. And I hope you're in London too, so that we can continue our conversation at Canada Gate.
I look forward to it very much so. Thank you so much, Michael. Lovely to talk to you. It will be a wonderful occasion, and untinged with sadness, we can have smiles from ear to ear the whole time. Looking forward to seeing you then, mate.
Great pleasure. Great pleasure. Thank you for asking me.